On to today's program. When I learned that Chief of Boulder Fire and Rescue, Michael Caldarazzo, was to be our speaker today, I wrote Program Committee Chair Carl Kurtz and said, "This is great! I hope he rides a hook and ladder fire truck and brings a Dalmatian with him to the meeting." There is no hook and ladder or Dalmatian in the parking lot. However, the chief is with us today. And that's okay. I am nonetheless, even though I don't have a hook and ladder fire truck, I'm pleased to welcome Chief Caldarazzo, the leader of one of our most wide-ranging and important community services, to tell us about Boulder Fire and Rescue and its strategic plan. Chief,
thank you,
the
sir.
podium is yours.
Appreciate it. So, good afternoon, everybody. Again, I'm Mike Caldarazzo. I'm Fire Chief for the City of Boulder Fire, and I'm here to talk to you today about the latest version of our master plan that just was reviewed by Council and will be accepted sometime in February. I'm going to talk specifically about one aspect of it that I think is important enough to get the word out now, because as a goal, I want you to understand not only is this a Boulder Fire Rescue goal, but it's one in which you can play a huge part in helping our community achieve. So that's really the point of the title of it, but I wanted to share first the vision that the group came up with, because I believe it really plays into how the master plan ended up with all of the goals that the team came up with. This is a vision, but I think it's more of a motto. This idea of people first, safety always, and excellence in all we do. I underline the one piece of this motto that I think really emphasizes the different approach that the team took to the master plan this time. And that is, let's talk about the experience that our customers are supposed to achieve as a result of the tax dollars they spend on the fire department. What is it that a user of the 911 system should experience as a result of the services that we're used to having in Boulder? And that comes through, I think, in this person's experience, an event that happened last year that I'm going to go into a little more detail towards the end of our conversation. But it's this kind of citizen in Boulder, this experience that highlights how our goals around the customer experience are critical. One in particular, this gentleman was playing tennis last year. I'm sure you can tell that by the court. But within seconds of this picture, this shot, his world turned upside down. And literally, and I mean this pun intended, within a heartbeat, his afternoon turned completely different. And it was this in mind, this experience in mind, that we came up with the goal that I want to share with you. So what you would expect a fire department to do is come up with, well, you respond to my need. If I call 911, I expect you to get there fairly quickly. That's almost a given, right? And that is a major focus area in the master plan. I won't belabor that big point. The bigger one is about cardiac events, and specifically out-of-hospital cardiac arrest events. And the planning team decided, hey, it's not too good for Boulder for us to beat the national average for survival of a cardiac arrest event, but not enough for it to just be about the person's heartbeat to start again, but their quality of life on the back end is a completely different experience. That they went beyond just what we call return of spontaneous circulation. That is, if we got them and their heart was beating in the hospital, done. That's not a people-first attitude. If I have a cardiac arrest event in Boulder, I want my life to be the same before as it was after. Please help that be the case for me. And that's where the planning team was. Here's the stark reality. In this country, these are taken from American Heart Association in 2015, actually. I don't have any newer national data for you at this point. But of the 326,000 out-of-hospital cardiac arrest events, ages, all ages, all sexes, only 8.3% actually experienced their life the same, basically, as they did before the event. This number should change nationally, but there's no reason that Boulder should be like this either. And that's where our planning team was. Now, the solution, of course, is this is not what we're asking for. The joke, of course, is you give money to local government or any government, and this is what we're going to do with it. No, that's not what this is about. We want you to take the idea that this is a shared approach, and this is why this matters. I know it probably goes without saying. I couldn't not put something scientific with so many smart people in the room, although this is really a simplistic version of what I'm trying to say. And that is, it used to be, if you look at the left-hand side, so the y-axis, probability, you get to 1, it's just near certainty, whatever you're talking about is going to happen. Bottom axis is time. And so the longer somebody goes without any sort of intervention in cardiac arrest, at 10 minutes, you have a pretty good chance that death is it, and that's final. That used to be kind of our bogey. That's what we were after. Not good enough if you're talking about a people-first and people-centric master plan and strategic goal. What we're after is the 5-minute mark, because if you have an event, we got to get to you as quickly as possible, someone does, so that your quality of life when restored is the same before and after. And you can see the probability goes way up as you get to closer to 5 minutes that something's going to happen in terms of a brain injury, and that happens often. And so a lot of the statistics you see out there, yes, the person survived, but it happened in that back end of the 5 to 10 minute window, and so they have a lot of neurological challenges. So, the American Heart Association came out with this many years ago, and they recognized all along that the solution to cardiac events, and by the way, I know the fire chief is talking about medical events, it seems counterintuitive, but that's what fire departments do for the most part these days. 80 to 90% of our calls are going to be related to having a patient on the scene. And so that's why this is one major focus of our master plan. But you can see I highlighted, and you could probably tell by the pictures what we actually mean by each of those links in the chain. So link number 1, as you can tell by the phone, is call 911. I think we do a pretty good job of that in this country. We've done really well in the last 50 plus years on using that number. The next 2 links in the chain are quick start of CPR. The second one is a quick application of an automated or just a defibrillator device that can shock the heart into a rhythm that we can use. And then the next 2 are really where the advanced care comes in, the responders, and then at the hospital, whether it's the emergency department or a critical care unit. I boxed in the parts that make this a community effort, because this is what our master plan is really about. Not just about, hey, give local government more resources to get more responders in the system, but what can we do as a community to move the needle and help with this? So here's the stark reality of that 4th link in the chain in Boulder. In 2018, we divide response into basic life support and advanced life support. Basic will get you an EMT who can do CPR, they can apply a defibrillator, they can even start an IV so that when the advanced life support arrives, they can start pushing medications. 90% of the time, getting that 4th link in the chain, you can expect it at 6 minutes and 13 seconds. That's Boulder. Advanced life support, where you can start pushing medications, do something more advanced before we take them to the hospital, that's 9 minutes and 41 seconds. So now if you think back to that chart I gave you, and when brain death occurs, we're already behind the 8 ball. So we can move this needle. We can change this with more resources. But I'm telling you that if we really, really want to make a change, we're also going to have to talk about the first 3 links in the chain. So I love this quote from Helen Keller, because if you expect the government to be able to solve all your problems, it probably will just create more for you rather than solve them. But together as a community, we can accomplish more for this one goal in the fire department's strategic plan than the fire department can do on its own simply asking for additional resources. So here's what we can do. CPR. You probably already heard CPR in every other letter in the alphabet. This is not your father's or grandfather's CPR anymore. In fact, we learned over the last X number of years, 20, 30 years, that stopping to give respirations actually does not improve the outlook for a cardiac arrest patient. And that if they can get compression started, move the blood, keep it moving through the system before the defibrillator gets there, that's going to do more for them. So the CPR you can take now is called hands-only or compression CPR. There's no more of this. There were two things used to stop people. Well, I don't want to put my lips on that, and then what if they throw up on me or something? And then what about, I do this and they sue me? Well, we've solved the Good Samaritan, we call it Good Samaritan laws. That's not the issue, but it was a messy business for people, and so a lot of people maybe have shied away unless we're talking about a caregiver for a family member. In the community, though, we're now talking about just doing compression-only CPR, and there are classes for that. As a department, we're going to have to do a much better job of working with our medical partners, emergency medical partners in the community to make these kinds of classes more out there. But you can take this, and you can volunteer to be somebody who can do this for anyone in the community. The other piece in that chain of survival is the application of a defibrillator. You've probably seen these all over the place in public. I don't recommend using a car. Start in anybody's heart. That's not a good idea. But I will tell you that in terms of defibrillators, they tell you exactly what to do now. It's like having a coach there on the scene. So you grab it off the wall, you go to the person, you apply it, and it'll do the rest for you. And you're going to see in this experience I gave you earlier, this actually is what happened. And I don't even think CPR had to be done at that point. So it does require that you know where AEDs are or make yourself aware of them. There is a way to do that. Turns out there are applications out there now, who knew, smartphones, that you can download. This is one I'm showcasing here is called PulsePoint. Communities around the country have these now, and it feeds what we call CAD data, computer-aided dispatching data, to these phones to tell you if an event is occurring within 100 feet of you or 200 feet, within walking distance, basically, and you can opt in. So if you knew compression CPR, you could opt in and say, I can go help. They're right around they're right in this next room, next door. I'm going to run over there and help. Start with CPR. And it would notify you on your phone. We don't have it in Boulder yet. It's around the Front Range. We're working on this as a piece to implementing our strategic plan. But you can download that app now, and you can even see what's going on around the Front Range. The other neat thing about these is they actually tell you where AEDs are, if there's one near you. And they even have what's called a collector app, so that if you're walking around and you see an AED that may not be on there, you can actually punch it in and make sure that we're aware of that. So neat stuff can help us as a community address cardiac survival rates. So I'd like to take you back to our incident. This is taken from the security cam feed at the time. And he was playing tennis. I don't remember how long he had actually been there, but this is at 3:22 and 30 seconds. Within 9 seconds, this is what it looked like. He said, the world went black and I went down. And that was it. His world just changed. The clock started, chain of survival started. Within seconds of this event, the person he was playing with and some of the others actually made the phone call to 911. That's an important thing for you to remember. Within, hit the wrong button, 2 minutes, there was an AED here. What you see in this case is possibly they were going to start CPR, but the AED got there, so the defibrillator is there. That's what the lady in the bottom part of the picture is actually doing. She's turning on the AED and following its directions and applying it to our patient. It delivers what he needs at that moment. This is within 2 minutes. We are well within that time frame where he has a good chance of getting up from this event. Notice when the responders get there. 10 minutes later. Now here's the thing about my response times I showed you earlier. That's from their station or their dispatch location to the address. It takes them a little bit of time to get in with the equipment and get in and get to the patient as well. So when they finally made it to the patient, 10 minutes in. Now if he had not had any assistance at all, one of two things would have been true in his case. One, he probably would have died, or two, he would have severe neurological problems. And I'm happy to tell you that as a result of this intervention, he's playing tennis again today as if the event never even happened. There should be no reason why that shouldn't be the case for many, many more people going down the road, not just in Boulder, but everywhere. But in this case, we're talking about our community. So, this is our actual goal from the master plan. It doesn't look like a lot, I know. If the rate is at 8%, the team said, well, let's get it up to 12%. But it's not just about asking for more response resources, it's about how we get out there into the community and invite them to be part of the solution to our challenge here in Boulder. Our challenge is to get to 12% or better. I think we can do much, much better as a community. And it does involve a commitment from many folks, even in this room, to either take classes in compression CPR and be ready. If the apps are available, to make those available to themselves, if they use smartphones, and be ready, because your community needs you. Fire department needs you, actually, to be part of our response force. Give you an example. There are about 20 to 30 emergency medical responders on duty right now around Boulder. With an app like the PulsePoint app that tells you where there's an event occurring, we can turn those 20 to 30 people into 5,000 or 10,000 for a cardiac arrest event. That's a huge game changer for being able to move the needle as a community on this goal. And that's what I came here to share with you. This is just my contact information, but I'm certainly willing to take any questions or challenges if you like. Yes, sir.
How do you know if the person is having a heart attack as opposed to a stroke or some other disease?
It actually doesn't matter. So we don't actually diagnose heart attack or whatever. What we're really, really looking, so the question was, how do we know somebody's having a heart attack? It doesn't matter if it's a heart attack or there's some other reason for them to stop breathing and their heart stop. What they teach you in CPR classes is you're going to check a pulse. They either have a pulse or they don't have a pulse. When you apply a defibrillator, it doesn't care what the underlying cause is. It will simply tell you the rhythm is shockable, step back, push the button, let me do my thing, stay away. And then it will tell you whether or not to start doing compression CPR again. So you don't even need to know why. They're down, check a pulse, okay. And if there's a defibrillator nearby, even better. Apply that quickly. Yes, sir.
We've all seen these CPR units all over the place. The last defibrillator units. The last CPR course that I was in, the fellow had a defibrillator there. And for those of you who haven't seen one, they're virtually idiot-proof if you don't panic. The leader of the course said, has any of you ever seen one of these things before? And one girl did not raise her hand. And he took his unit and he handed it to the girl, and Rosassa Annie is on the floor, and he said, do it. And she opened the thing up where it said open, and it talked to her in a very clear manner, and she put the electrodes on Rosassa Annie, and Rosassa Annie was dead. Because it was a dummy, all right? It's something, it's something that you practice CPR on. It's just a mannequin. But all of us watched this, and we all left that course. We will never be afraid of grabbing one of those units off the wall. And the prices have gotten much, much lower over the years. I actually bought one. For those of you who want to buy one, the lithium batteries will freeze up in the trunk of the car at about 20 degrees, maybe 15 degrees. So in the winter, it's not in the car, but 3 seasons it's in the car. And these units are absolutely idiot-proof if you don't panic. So I thought I'd share that.
Thank you.
Yes, my question was, what is the impact of traffic in Boulder on all of your statistics?
Great question. It does impact it. I think we're talking seconds rather than minutes in most cases. But I don't know that we've done a true study of traffic impacts. But I'll tell you that we do. When we propose, if we're proposing a new station or we're talking about getting from one place to another, we factor in traffic by reducing, we reduce the speed that they would travel on the road. So if it's a 30-mile-an-hour road, say, we would assume they're only able to travel 20. So we factor that in already to a degree when we look at our proposed response times from different locations. So our CAD system does that. It's sort of a Google Maps sort of thing that we use. So it factors that in. I don't know how well it's factoring it in, but those response times there, I think, are fairly reflective of what we can expect for 9 out of every 10 calls. Many of them are actually faster than that, so that's sort of like, use that as worst case scenario. Still not great for cardiac survival rates and good outcomes. So we want those to be better, but it's unrealistic to propose lots of response resources when we can probably better use a lot of community resources on the front end in those chain, in the links to the chain of survival. If that makes sense. So.
Are you providing CPR classes then as part of this initiative?
Our plan is to do that. So our plan is to provide more compression CPR. We're not the only ones who would be doing it. Of course, the American Heart Association does it. They're also, through the hospital system, there are opportunities there. So our plan, the goal is there. I guess I should bring that back up. So the goal is there, but how we get there, how we actually get to this goal is not well defined in the plan yet. We're gonna, once it's accepted by City Council, we will hand it off to our program manager for this and say, run and help us use community resources and make this a reality. And what you're seeing today, so forgive me, is sort of the first lobby. No one else has seen this. This is I get to do this because I'm the fire chief and the only person who can yell at me is the city manager, but this is sort of our first foray into educating the community around this particular goal.
As a follow-up to that question, are there any available courses that are free for wilderness first aid, where response times are naturally much lower?
That's a great question. I will have to get back to you on that because we also work with open space and mountain parks, and that's a question that comes up between our two departments often. We are part of the wilderness response, but it's actually chaired more, believe it or not, by the sheriff and the county. But if you give me your name, I bet I can get you some information on that.
Just wondering also why the survival rates are so abysmal. 8% seems so low, and even your goal of 12% seems very low.
It's pretty low. I've heard better survival rates in different communities, such as like in the Northwest, Seattle, Portland, even in California, that are much higher than these. And the planning team decided, first of all, why is the number so low? And the number is low, I think, because for too long we've relied on this as a government solution. The government will respond. Well, these response times are not completely out of the ordinary for many communities in the country. And so if you're going to rely on the government to fix your problem in 6 minutes, I'm here to tell you, we better take a better community approach to this. And a lot of communities are waking up to what American Heart Association has known for a long time. We need to do a better job of approaching this from the community perspective so that if somebody goes down here and there's no responder, there are 120 responders that can get started. That is really just starting to take off. That's why the numbers, and this is 2015, so the numbers might have crept up a little bit. I would love them to be way more than 12%. I think in Seattle and Portland, those areas, they're talking double-digit numbers already that they're at, and I believe that is with no neurologic. Because you got to watch it. Some say, well, we got 50% survival rate. That's because they took them to the hospital and their heart was working again, but they have a long road on the back end because of all the brain injuries. we want to avoid that for sure if we can. That's why that number is really low. It's higher if you just count their heart started again.
Chief, I have a quick question about the relocation of the fire station at 30th and Arapahoe. Is there a current plan for that?
There is. In fact, we are designing that station now. So it will be, if you can picture in your head the 30th Street corridor where Bluff hits it from the east, just south of Valmont, the old RV center, and there's a vacant lot there as well. Those properties there are slated for the relocation of that station a little bit north. So, do I go with whoever's got the mic? Because that probably.
First of all, thank you for that goal. I think this is really great. I think one of the other things, though, that we need to recognize is that people we do a horrible job of recognizing when a heart attack. That film basically showed somebody dropping. But I think we need to educate the public. I'm not promoting more false alarms, but maybe we should, because people don't even recognize when a heart attack is occurring.
Sure.
And we've got to make sure people understand that if you've got arm pain and you're sweating and you've got shortness of breath, something's going on.
Agreed. Yes, sir? I think she's got a mic for you.
Two questions. One, the initiation of CPR with a vigorous chest thump, which may actually reverse a VTAC. So, I mean, that's not something that you mentioned.
True.
But while you're looking for the external defibrillator, start right off with a very vigorous chest thump. But on a second question is, with the distribution of the firehouses, in most cases, it's the fire truck that first goes. But also AMR has ambulances tucked all over the place. Is there a coordination in where the ambulances are sitting to perhaps fill in some of the holes that the firehouses aren't covering?
The simple answer to your question is yes. And AMR actually works for us, and they are part of our dispatch system. So they actually show up on our map, and the dispatchers know which is actually the closest unit. And in fact, in many cases, because they stage, they beat the fire truck there, and then all the fire truck became was a transporter of additional rescuers to help with whatever that was. So it's definitely coordinated.
Okay. In 2012, my daughter, who is now 15, and I'm happy to say she's very healthy, but she was 8 years old and she had a terrible accident in the Eldorado Springs pool. She was a very good swimmer. It was a birthday party. I was not there. And we don't know exactly what happened, but they retrieved her from the bottom of the pool after what they think was 5 minutes, and her heart had stopped. And thankfully, people there did CPR. There was no AED at the time there. And I'm grateful to say that this is a good story. However, it took 19 minutes for the responders to get there, because at the time there was no firehouse in Eldorado Springs, and they came from a fire department that was near the Range Rover dealership on Colton Road, and they said the whole time they drove the 19 minutes, they thought there's an 8-year-old girl's life who may not survive. And they told me whenever I had a chance to speak this, and so I'm doing that now, so thank you for being gracious with me. But there is something that goes on between the city of Boulder. There was a firehouse less than a mile away in Table Mesa, and they were not able to respond to my daughter. I just wanted to address the city of Boulder versus county of Boulder issue. Thank you.
So I've been here 5 years. I'll address that issue. I have worked exceptionally hard to blur the lines between jurisdictions for that reason exactly. I don't believe, regardless of who's paying the taxes or where the line is, that the closest responder shouldn't be available and get there. And so do my counterparts in all of the jurisdictions around us. So we're working very hard to make that as seamless as possible. We have some technological challenges, though, too, with our different dispatch centers coordinating and communicating, because they actually can't see us. So the county dispatch center cannot actually see our units in the same computer-aided dispatching system. something the chiefs in the region are working hard to try to make more seamless. So it looks like one big map with resources that any dispatching agency can just point to, click, and send. So we are working on that. You deserve better than that.
Is there a requirement, or should there be a requirement, or let me just ask the question, is there a requirement that for any public gathering there should be a defibrillator there? Do we have a defibrillator in this building?
There is one.
Okay.
It's just not collected yet in the app. So in most public structures or publicly accessible structures, there will be one. There isn't one based on gathering that I'm aware of. But it is, the structure itself should have one or two. So I'm pretty sure there's one here. Our app, one of the things that we can do as a community is, some communities do this, they give people, they say, download the app. Now, when you see an AED in some public place, see if it's there, and if it's not, let us know. Well, Boulder is not that advanced yet, so we're working on that, but we want to be able to have people look at it, click it, and then from now on it's registered, because that's how they're getting their information, as opposed to sending somebody out and going and trying to find them all.
You know, one idea that comes to mind is part of the implementation of your plan. Would you consider having an annual mass buy of AEDs where people could benefit from quantity discounts through the fire department, pay that cost for the reduced cost that would come from buying, say, 100 of them, and get them out into the community rather rapidly?
That's a great idea, and I don't know that it would just be through the fire department, if not the medical community in general, as we tried to marshal all the resources that are already here. I would love to spearhead the work. I don't know that we would do it through us, or rather through maybe Boulder Community Health or one of those. So it's a fantastic idea, and I think that fits in with this nicely.
Chief, quick question. You mentioned that that the number looks like 8%. What is Boulder's current rate?
That's
and why how do you account for the difference between here and places in the Pacific Northwest that have been more successful in their efforts?
Okay, fair question. So the first question was, well, let me take the second one first. So the reason they're ahead of us as opposed to where we are, there's a lot of probably different reasons why we're not at their level. But I'm not exactly sure I can answer that question for you right now because of the first part of the question, and that is, I have no idea what our true cardiac survival rate actually is in Boulder. I showed you the national statistic because one of the things that came out of this conversation is the fact that we were doing a very poor job. I know how many occurred I can tell you how many cardiac arrest events occurred last year. 39, I believe it was. And that was for when our response occurred. Of those, how many of those walked out of the hospital a day, 30 days later with no neurological deficits? That requires an interface with our community health partners that we don't actually have at the moment. That came to light when we started looking at this, like, wow, we've got a statistic we can't even establish a baseline at the moment for. So that's the first part of your question. I don't actually know yet. Give us a year and of working with our partners, and I think we can get there. There are, of course, some HIPAA-related rules we have to work through so that we're not violating any private patient privacy rules. But beyond that, I think we can get the statistics. As far as the Northwest being maybe more mature than us, I'm not exactly sure that's the case. I know they're a little bit ahead of us. They have things like the PulsePoint app already in place. They've been publicizing the idea of compression CPR probably better than we have been doing. And so we're following on to that and finally making that a huge push for us. But we also recognize it takes a lot of community partners to get there. It's not just a fire department related thing. As a matter of fact, you probably didn't even think I was going to talk to you today about anything medical since I'm the fire chief. But it is what we do. It's what we do. When most people call 911, there is a patient involved almost always. So bad answers to your question. I hope to have data in a year or so, and I hope that we will track better with some of those folks who are reporting double digits and more cardiac survival rates with no neurological deficits.
Mike, I just checked. We
Hi,
have
Susan.
an AED right outside the door here, so everybody can look at it as they leave.
I knew it was there. Just saying. I couldn't.
And I would just offer, Boulder Community Health does offer free CPR and AED classes, locations throughout the county several times a year. Takes 45 minutes. They're great classes. So check online.
Yep. Thank you.
I just want to point out two things that interfere with the recovery rate. One is fear of getting involved, and that's where you can really make a big difference.
Sure.
And the other is comorbid disease. Many of the people who have this happen have something else wrong with them.
True.
And so you're never going to get as close to 100% as you like, but there's lots of room for improvement.
Agreed. I think you had one question back there.
I'm going to give you an adage. If you want to teach an 11-year-old boy how to save his grandmother's life, teach him the Heimlich maneuver. Far and away, that's more successful than what we're talking about. I'm not saying don't do this, but where's the discussion about the Heimlich?
Good point.
I'll leave it with you.
If someone has a blockage in their heart and you do strong compressions on the heart, how does that help? Let's say there's a blockage, the heart stops. Do the compressions just, I guess they get the blood flowing, just pump the blood through the system? I'm just trying to understand.
So I'm not a physician, but I stayed in a Holiday Inn last night. And one of the big things about that is more about getting the circulation up to the brain, because the brain is a very oxygen-hungry organ. And that helps to maintain the goal that we're after, and that is, the blood was pumping to the brain and they're not going to suffer brain damage as a result of the event. The blockage itself is going to have to be addressed in that final chain by the doctors in the hospital, in the ER, or cardiac care unit. So that's how that's going to happen.
Let me help you. I am a physician. The blockage is in the blood vessel running to the heart. There's not that the heart is blocked. The plumbing of the heart is intact, but the blockage, and so if you can get the heart pumping again, you can supply the rest of the system.
That's very good.
Thank you. What happens if you're by yourself and think you're having a heart attack?
I would do my best to get the 911 number speed dialed, because if you have an unwitnessed event, your chances drop dramatically.
I have heard that if you start feeling symptoms, that you just start coughing. Yeah, just vigorous coughing. Just manipulate yourself to cough, and that will put enough pressure on the heart to kind of keep the circulation going until you get to the hospital.
So all I can tell you is, don't delay calling 911. And if that works, great. I have no idea if it does or it doesn't. It couldn't hurt at that point, right? So really, you want someone to get you to advanced care as quickly as possible.
23 years ago, I found myself in a ditch not too far from Boulder Community Hospital. I'm a physician and I'd just seen a patient there. I called the emergency room and talked to my emergency room doctor, and he said, "Gene, just be quiet, I'll send an ambulance right away." However, I started to come around. I was sweaty, and I got out of my car and pushed it out of the ditch. It wasn't that far in, and drove home. My wife then took me back to the hospital. It worked. I think pushing your car out of the ditch is a good thing to do.
So I'm not going to put that in my PowerPoint, but I'll keep that under advisement, for sure. Have I overstepped my bounds here in time? I want to make sure I'm good on time.
On that note, Chief Caldarazzo, thank you so much for
you.
having a conversation with us. As you learned earlier today, Rotary does get the final word in all this. We're so honored that you chose us as one of your early presentations in the new process of getting the community involved in doing the work. I worked in dispatch at the very beginning of my career 42 years ago, and things have come a long way since then. We went from doing everything manually to having things like emergency medical dispatch and now much more than that. And so thank you for continuing to move us forward, making the community safer and all the work that you're doing.
Thank you.
One of Rotary's signature projects is ending polio. We've been working on that for a long time as well. And as a token of our appreciation for your time and remarks today, we're donating 100 doses of polio vaccine to the International Polio Program.